Master Wayne, you and your friends better batten down the hatches, because when it hits, you're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
Or, as Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman said, life's a bitch. Now so am I. These words, spoken by two different portrayals of Catwoman, Anne Hathaway and Michelle Pfeiffer respectively, sum up villainhood for me. The first quote represents the underdog, Robin Hood-esque, destitute personalities of villains like Catwoman, the Joker, and Killmonger. And the second represents the traumatized, affronted, damaged beginnings of characters like Draco Malfoy, Snape, and Jennifer Check. These villains kill, blow up hospitals, steal from others, be horrible to innocent children no less for all of their lives, and then expect us to believe that they have somehow reformed into this brilliant person when, oh, sorry, we're not there yet. Even as they're causing mayhem, plotting the end of the earth as we know it, and heckling our protagonist like a cat chasing a mouse, villains and their less violent, morally great counterparts, the antagonist, have a soft spot in our hearts nonetheless. This is clearly evident in the sympathetic movies we have received about previously scorned villains like Cruella, which was a little heavy-handed, Maleficent, Joker, and Birds of Prey, which finally allowed us to see Harley Quinn rather than just a sidekick shown through the effervescent male gaze. How utterly uncomfortable those shorts must have been. And of course, we can see it even further in the growing popularity of social media aesthetics like villaincore. From Tom Riddle to Catwoman and Killmonger to Jennifer Check, what do we find so tantalizingly interesting about our dark leading characters? And what is it about them that outshines even that of the blinding might of their heroic counterparts? Personally, it's the costumes for me. According to Merriam-Webster, a villain is a character in a story or play who opposes the hero, a deliberate scoundrel or criminal. Antagonists, on the other hand, are defined as one that contends with or opposes another, synonymous with adversary and opponent. They aren't typically as crime-driven or murderous as villains tend to be, but there is a possibility for some villains to be antagonists as well, and some antagonists to not really be villains in the direct sense of the word. A hero, on the other hand, is defined as a person who is admired for great or brave acts or fine qualities. Harry Potter, love him or hate him with a fiery passion, would be considered a hero. He is quite literally known for bravery, and would you look at that? But that's not the only type of hero out there. Storyboard That explains there are many different types of heroes like classic heroes, superheroes, tragic heroes, epic heroes, and anti-heroes. But for the sake of brevity, let's just forget I said all of that. Every piece of information I just told you is useless, and you'll never use it again. Does anyone else feel like they're in math class right now? Despite their ominous descriptors, villains and antagonists alike still draw in admiration, to the point where we structured entire aesthetics around their devious existence. According to Aesthetics Wiki, the villain core aesthetic sprouted up sometime in the 2010 decade, and judging by the timing of certain playlists and themes, this surge most likely happened in the past few years. Double points if it happened in 2020 because that would make for a very interesting analysis. The genetic makeup of villain core consists of crowns, dark color palettes, ball gowns to attend that oh-so-fated party where the enemies to lovers storyline unfurls, wine, white people, 2015 Tumblr quotes that you could have probably found on my aesthetic Tumblr back in the day, lots of tragic villain playlists, and a very big emphasis on doing things quite evilly. It's a sister to the femme fatale trope as well as an acquaintance to the demon core aesthetic, which apparently has nothing to do with the 14-pound subcritical mass of plutonium that killed two scientists in the 1940s. An Urban Dictionary definition describes villain core as, quote, a music genre invented by 13-year-old girls not wanting to be put in the same category as e-girls. The genre is not to be made fun of because of its totally innovative structure and new sampling. None of the music used in these playlists have ever been considered anything but music for villains, and therefore was made for such a purpose as villaincore, end quote. It's like we're back in 2008 again, and hating teen girls is its own personality trait. Do you think they identify with the Joker? Lastly, we can find this aesthetic in popular books that navigate morally great characters like The Secret History, Six of Crows, and one of my new favorites, Legendborn. Legendborn is especially interesting to me because, hello, black girl as the main character, but also its two leading men represent the topic of this video very well. There's Nick, who's supposed to be this blonde-haired, blue-eyed hero, and Selwyn, who is his very grumpy, very dark counterpart. I won't expound too much just so I don't spoil it for those who are thinking of reading it. It's by Tracy Deonn, by the way, but I noticed very early on that I was intrigued more so by Selwyn's character than Nick's, and it made me really wonder why. Nick is supposed to be this valiant, preppy hero, everything you would look for in a leading man, and Selwyn is, forgive me, a bitch. He's everything a villain, or more appropriately an antagonist may be: cold, distant, and unapologetically hostile. Yet he quickly became my second favorite character. After Bree, of course. This is a running theme in my life. I find more of a thrill in the antagonist rather than the heroes. I asked on my Instagram story whether you guys preferred villains over heroes, and the answers were overwhelmingly in favor of the villain. Some people, okay, a lot of people, think villains are hot, that they have cool costuming, that they are usually queer-coded, that they keep the plot interesting / moving forward, that they're complex, fun, and aren't created to be liked or digestible, that they're attractive, charming, and charismatic, and one answer that I found particularly intriguing is that they help demand main character complexity or expose a lack of it. That's Shakespearean, my darling. That's my thing. According to Antonio Del Drago, villains are often portrayed as powerful, intelligent, immoral, and wounded. A masterclass staff writer adds on to that by stating, quote, "Villains have a capacity for evil and a willingness to do bad things, a backstory that explains their villainous behavior, a complex range of emotions, a point of view that justifies their evil actions, and a special skill set that sets them apart, like Hannibal Lecter, a cannibal and brilliant psychologist." Heroes don't get nearly as many cool descriptive words. Or a bullwhip. They get girl number 3 sitting behind Shri in a movie's in-screen treatment or bust. The sources I used to find heroic descriptions all featured the same adjectives: brave, honest, determined, courageous, inspirational, and selfless. Somewhere in between all of that, you can add boring. Of course, these are all valiant things to be and to look for in others, but that's usually not all there is to a person. When a hero is watered down to their most perfect and inspirational traits, we get very flat characters who can do no wrong, even when they do wrong, that we're expected to like but end up despising. There's Harry Potter, who I personally find to be a complex character, but other responses relegate him as one-dimensional and boring. There's Batman, who is heralded as a so-called anti-hero, but is never really allowed to just do something theoretically horrible. I mean, sure, he hacked the phones of millions of people without their consent and used it to spy on them, but Facebook does that every single day. I mean, he's not even allowed to be the one to kill his parents' killer like he planned to. All of the harm he does comes indirectly, essentially absolving him of blame. Then again, the closest I got to the Batman lore was the Dark Knight trilogy, and that was only so I could see Anne Hathaway do this.
Look how she ate that.
See? Not everything I say comes from an educated background. Sometimes I just want to watch the world burn. Which reminds me of the time someone commented that I must mispronounce words on purpose so I can get men to explain them to me. As if I just can't be a dumb bitch. I've got layers too, you know. Heroes can't be contradictions. That makes them less than perfect, which can be detrimental to a story, especially if the main character or protagonist is supposed to be used as a blank character for audiences to project onto, or if everything is supposed to go in their favor for plot purposes. As we've seen with past characters like Tori Vega, who admittedly isn't a hero but a protagonist, this can become a double-edged sword. As Christian Bale's Batman said, "As a symbol, I can be incorruptible, everlasting." And that's exactly what heroes are. Symbols of the greater good, visions of humanity at its finest, something we will arguably never reach. And that can make them unrelatable. Enter stage left, the bad guys. I do agree that sometimes authors tend to spend more time fleshing out the lives and personality of the villains, only because most of them don't serve as central protagonists and are rarely expected to be projected onto by the audiences. So they're allowed to be contradictions in places where heroes simply can't. They're suave but can be clumsy. They're flawed but have room for redemption. They're powerful but can come from seedy and oftentimes powerless backgrounds. As Maroni told Batman in The Dark Knight, "You got rules. The Joker, he's got no rules." Or, as Jim Gordon said, there's a point far out there when the structures fail you, when the rules aren't weapons anymore, they're shackles, letting the bad guys get ahead. These rules, these impossible heights that heroes face on their pedestal, hold them back from full complexity. And what's more, I really think villains lend us the ability to envision the worst of humanity, the evil that may reside in all of us, and be able to... I'm just messing with you. Villains are hot, okay? They're sexy, they're charming, and I'm clearly not the only one who thinks that, so we're all just going to be in a cell together in horny jail. I didn't read Tom Riddle fanfiction in my youth because I understood the complexity of humanity and could smoothly analyze the concept of good versus evil. I was like 14. I read Tom Riddle fanfiction in my youth because Christian Coulson in Chamber of Secrets awakened something within me. Same with Jennifer Check. I saw that scene from the movie, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about, and I had to promptly go to the computer and research some feelings I had, like, why do I suddenly want to buy a clear phone case? Glad that was a phase, am I right? Sometimes it does just come down to pretty privilege, and that's okay. Not every villain hits the spot. They could be complex, flawed, human, and still not be romanticized in the media. I mean, Pennywise is a villain. He's intelligent, funny, and cold-hearted. Do people want to... You know what? Don't answer that. Orrin E. Clapp explores just what allows an audience to forgive criminals, villains, and antagonists in The Clever Hero by focusing mainly on comedic flair and crafty success. Clapp states, "Certainly, some of the most widely liked men in America have been wags and wisecrackers, rustic homespun philosophers, yarn tellers, buffoons, fast talkers, and the like, who gave the crowd something besides sober performances and plain facts. He may not be a good man. Indeed, he is usually far from being an exemplar of virtue, but in his own field, he is hard to beat." I think Clapp's argument is interesting on its own, but can be stretched even further than slapstick humor. I think we also have a tendency to forgive those who are conventionally attractive, or at least whatever we deem to be attractive. Perhaps we can even go so far as to say that prettiness assuages evil. There's a term for that I just can't quite... Take Draco Malfoy, for instance. Draco was a big bully in the series. He was classist, purist, violent, and called one of his classmates a slur. Of course, you can argue that he was just a kid who was manipulated by his parents and was fed his worldviews, which many believe would have changed had he been given the chance. But he never got one. Or rather, he never got a full chance. I think Turf K. Rowling played around a lot with good and evil within Draco. He had to balance loyalty to his family with doing what was right numerous times within the series, and more often than not, he usually chose that loyalty over change. Which makes this next statement very believable. In 2014, J.K. Turfling stated, "Draco remains a person of dubious morality in the 7 published books, and I have often had cause to remark on how unnerved I have been by the number of girls who fell for this particular fictional character. Draco has all the dark glamour of the anti-hero. Girls are very apt to romanticize such people. All of this left me in the unenviable position of pouring cold common sense on ardent readers' daydreams, as I told them, rather severely, that Draco was not concealing a heart of gold under all of that sneering and prejudice, and that no, he and Harry were not destined to end up best friends." Prejudice, you say? Anyone remember Snape? You know, about yay big, prejudiced, bullier of 11-year-old kids, even the ones who weren't Harry Potter, so the whole excuse that Snape bullied him just because he looked like James and Lily doesn't make sense. Yeah, he got an entire character arc where we learned that he was somehow not as bad as he was made out to be, even though it made absolutely no sense because he was still a bad person. Anyways, JK Turf tried to pour cold water down the back of heated fans' back, but it only made them hotter. Draco Talk recently saw a surge in participants. There's Slytherin party playlists that feature you dancing with Draco all night long. There's no doubt thousands of fanfiction about him. He's got it going on in the media, and people generally treat the character as if he's never done anything wrong. Never mind the use of slurs. Now, if he looked at a puppy the wrong way. And the same goes for most other villains and antagonists. Whether it be the costumes, queer-coded writing, or simply pretty privilege that makes us forget our woes, villains have successfully concocted yet another devious plan to overtake humanity. And if they come in looking anything like that, well, God help us all.